There is almost nothing more powerful than the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves in our own mind. And we have the choice to decide whether that is an empowering story or one that is a diminishing story. Do you ever find yourself living life on autopilot, surrounded by societal expectations, and then finding through social conditioning that you're not feeling true to yourself? Maybe not even liking yourself? Well, that's the story of our guest today, Brendon Watt of Access Consciousness. Shares his inspirational story of how he bounced back from struggling with addiction through to having full control of his consciousness and his life. There's going to be something in this for all of us. Sit back, listen up, and enjoy the show. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project. I'm greatly honoured today to be joined by Brendon Watt. Brendon is a worldwide keynote speaker on the topic of change. He's also a best-selling author and co-authored a book called Relationship. Are you sure you want one? That's a really interesting question. But he really talks to people about these choice moments that you have in your life about making change, and that no matter where you are in your life, there's always something that you can do differently to make some changes in your life. So we're going to unpack all of that today. Before we get too deep into it, Brendon, I'd love to know a little bit more about your backstory and what led you into this situation today where you work with Access Consciousness and you're a facilitator and you coach people around this topic of change.
Yeah. Hi, Mick. Thanks for having me. It's an interesting story. I grew up in Australia and, in very lower class conditions but basically, moved through life not thinking much of myself. When I left school, I started a trade tiling in Australia. And that was basically what I was told I could do. It's like you do school, you get a trade, you have a family, and that was pretty much it. So I was ticking the boxes. And by the time I was 29, and my son at the time, he was 4 years old, and I was just miserable. Like I could not get my life to work. And I was like, how is it that everybody else can seem to have some sense of joy or at least some sense of themselves? And I didn't have it. So that led me into this new journey where it was basically one day I kind of finally put the white flag up and just went, I'm miserable. I don't know what to do next. And I just kind of begged. I was like, whatever is out there, I need some help. I need something different right now. And it was a little dramatic, but I was being very dramatic because my life wasn't working. And it was the next day that I found this little ad in the newspaper, the Sunshine Coast Daily, that said, all of life comes to me with ease, joy, and glory. Call Mel. And I called this girl and she was like, hey, I do this hands-on body process. It's called the Access Consciousness Bars. And she said, it's 32 points on the head. And it's kind of like deleting your computer files in your head. And I was like, okay. She was like, at best case, it'll be like you've had a great massage. At worst case, it'll be like you've had a great massage. And at best case, your whole life will change. And, I was kind of at the point where I was like, all right, I'll try anything. And I went and had this session with this girl. My whole world began to change. She did this process on me and I just sobbed. I literally sobbed for an hour and a half while she did this. And it was like everything that I'd built up around myself, all the walls that I put around myself just began to crumble. And that day was the beginning of a very different journey for me.
All right. So tell me more about some of those moments when you go back to your 4-year-old and in the bedroom, etc. So you were saying that you're a tiler and you felt like that was what you were expected to do. It wasn't the exact words you were saying, but you were kind of feeling like you landed there because that's where life led you as opposed to something that you were choosing yourself. Tell us more about that. How do you wake up one day and realize that you've just kind of stumbled into that?
Well, yeah, good point. And for me, it was a lot of my life was on autopilot. It was just one of the things I've learned over the years is that your point of view creates your reality. So my point of view about myself leading up until this point was never great. I always saw myself as less than. I always saw myself as never going to be able to accomplish much. I always saw myself as not successful and could never be successful. And so that point of view alone was what I was creating my life with. And, I could look back and give you thousands of reasons for having that point of view about myself. Abuse in childhood and different things in school and different, things that were there showing up. But at the end of the day, what I had to look at was that was my point of view about myself. And so, growing up, I grew up with a dad who really had that point of view. It was this what you do. If you're going to be a man, go and get a trade, finish school, have kids, get a wife. And, and that's basically what you've got. And I think for a lot of us, we don't realize quite how much that programming or the way that you're conditioned plays into the way that we create our lives. So for me, put pretty simply, I didn't see I had another choice.
I'm hearing two things though, Brendon. One is the societal expectation. So if you're a man, you get a trade, you get a wife, you get a child, you're the breadwinner, all of these kind of stereotypical kind of things that do build up on us over time. But there was also a story that you're telling yourself about yourself. And that is, that I'll never amount to much. There's not much more for me.
Yeah. And I think a lot of us have that, and that's why we had a chat briefly before we started this interview about the way that we'll look for ways to compare ourselves to others. We'll look at, and with the way that the world is right now, social media is a big thing. That's a big part of where people look to or what they engage with. So, you'll look at something like that. And I think for a lot of us, we're like, okay, how do I create an image of myself that's accepted in the world? How do I create an image of myself to show other people what I've decided they need to see me as? But it doesn't do much for creating a life that's actually true for you, and that was the big thing for me. Was I knew at the time that I was not being true to myself. I knew that I'd created myself as something, and this wasn't about the family or the job or any of that stuff. I just knew I wasn't shining the way that I'd like to. I wasn't liking myself. I think that's a big part too, is one of my most relevant things in my life right now is if I don't like me, if I don't like myself, what's going on? Like if I'm judging myself, what am I choosing that for? What am I trying to create with that? Or who am I being with that? And so for me, it was more, and you kind of you've chosen something for that long that you've created something that is comfortable, and the idea of anything existing beyond it was just, I couldn't even see it.
This thought around you weren't even liking yourself, the thought that was popping into my head right there, Brendon, is that if you're not at the point where you like yourself, it's then very hard to convince yourself that others will like you too.
Yeah, isn't it interesting with that? And then what we do with that is we start creating the separation, not only between us and us, like with every judgment that we have, we start creating the separation with us and other people and going, well, they don't see me as this, or they're judging me as this, or this constant cycle of judgment that I see for a lot of us is really the thing that creates destruction in our lives, creates the place where we can't have success, the place where we can't have joy, because judgment and joy, they don't coexist. Judgment and gratitude, they don't coexist. Judgment and success and actually liking yourself, they don't coexist. So the big thing for me was, like I said, with getting to that point, it was not only not liking my life and what I'd created it as, it was not liking myself. And that was where I got to the point with, okay, this needs to change.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So what I'm hearing here is an element of confirmation bias, right? So you end up in this situation where you're not liking yourself, but then when you're projecting yourself out in the world, you're starting to then have that reflected back to you, and everything you're seeing from others and your interaction with others, just confirming the belief that you had in your head. And the more you do it, the stronger that belief gets. And before you know it, you are in the point of feeling like there is no other, there is no better, there's nothing beyond this. How does that sit with you?
Yeah, you're totally correct though. And I see a lot of us do it where it's like, we'll have a point of view about ourselves, whatever that might be, we'll project that out there into the world. then we'll project that other people are going to treat us that way. Other people will treat you that way. And then you've validated your point of view that you have about you. Now there's no need for change. See, I'm right. I am less than. Everyone treats me that way. One of the things with this is we teach people how to treat us by the way that we treat ourselves. So like in having a bigger perspective of it, like with it, if we were going to create a world with a lot more kindness, if we were going to create a world with a lot more of where people can actually tap into their energy and what's creative about them, then it's going to have to start with each and every one of us actually desiring that for ourselves.
Yeah, really good, Brendon. Now, I want to come back to this comparison to others, right? So we've got this mirror up to ourselves now, and we'll come back to judgment later as well. But we're judging ourselves and we're confirming these beliefs all the time. You mentioned before about the comparison to others and people's Instagram lives. Tell me more about the impact that had on you.
I think we're pretty close on it with the thing we're talking about with, projecting what everybody sees you as based on the way you see yourself. Like I would look around and I would see everything that showed me every judgment that I had about me. So everything was about comparing myself to everybody else. Well, they can be happy, but I can't. My point of view about myself is I can't be happy. And I see you take social media, for example, it's like you could get on there and put anything on social media. You can get onto social media, create an image of yourself, show, look, this is what I'm happy and I'm wonderful. Okay, but are you, and so for me over the years, because I've seen where I've, created images of myself, but it gives me no freedom to explore what's true for me. So, I might go out, like one of the big things that's been up in my life over the years was I always struggled with addiction and more specifically alcohol. So that was like something that I was like trying to keep hidden from the world. And it's only been the last couple of years in actually going on a journey of sobriety. And rather than look at it as, oh my God, that's a terrible thing, you shouldn't talk about that, and alcohol and, and stuff like that. It's like, what if I got really vulnerable with myself and actually exposed what I've been dealing with and used what if we, for each and every one of us, like, what if we truly could show up warts and all, like, and just go, here I am, I've got great stuff about me. I got some not so great stuff. I got stuff I'm working on. But we didn't have to try and put walls up to create some image of ourselves. Because one of the things with judgment that cripples us in our lives is you can't receive anything that doesn't match it, which is why when you have judgments about yourself, if somebody sees you as phenomenal, you're like, see, they're judging me. You won't even see where they're acknowledging you and, trying to get you to look at how cool you are. And I actually remember this when I first started Access Consciousness, and I was doing these, I met the founder and the co-founder and was like, my life was changing. And, and had these guys going, man, you're a great gift. And thank you for being here and acknowledging me as me, what they saw I could be. And I was just like, what are these people looking at? There was nowhere in my world I could receive somebody looking at me with admiration.
I want to get to that point in a moment. I want to come back to what you're sharing there. And this is coming back to that confirmation bias again. And I'll share something that's really popping strongly into my head, Brendon. And I'm thinking about the work of Otto Scharmer and Theory U when he talks about 4 levels of listening. And at level 1, we're only hearing the things that confirm what we already believe. So if we're projecting ourselves out in the world and we're judging ourselves and going, well, I'm no good, I'm not good at this, I'm not good at that, etc. When we're then out in the world interacting with other human beings, we're only going to hear and notice the things that confirm what we already believe. And we're not going to pay attention to any indication that is contra to the view that we've already formed in our head. So even if someone else is trying to say, hey, Brendon, I really like you, you're going to almost ignore it and deflect it. It's not even going to come into your consciousness, to use the word consciousness here, because you don't believe it yourself.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't match your reality. And that's the thing that judgment creates, that you can't receive anything that doesn't match your reality. So yeah, you will use everything as a way to validate the points of view that you have about yourself. But also the thing that we do with it is you won't question anything that doesn't match it. So it won't be, and we've all been taught this to the degree that we've been taught it, but having an answer is the valuable thing. Like, even as a kid, what are you going to be when you grow up? Have you figured it out yet? I'm 4. Like, I have no idea. I just want to be happy. Like, I just want to I want to make other people happy and, and I want to have fun and I want to be creative. No, figure it out. Like, where's your answer? And so we've got to learn. And one of the things I've had to learn and I'm still learning is to be in question, because the question always empowers. It's always there for the universe to go, all right, here's a different awareness, or here's this, but it's always opening doors. What we do with an answer is as soon as we have to have an answer is you have nothing beyond that answer. It stops at the answer. And so being, one of the things that we talk about in Access is, first of all, the tagline of Access is empowering you to know that you know. Because that's the other thing is each and every one of us have unique capacities and unique abilities. And my point of view is each and every one of us on this planet has that, but are we ever shown how to tap into it? How to tap into that difference, how to tap into that beauty, how to tap into what's true for each and every one of us.
So I want to work towards that now. You were touching on it before. So you've found a community of people that saw something in you that you didn't see or believe yourself. How did you let go to allow that in?
Oh man, I'm still letting go, and I'm still letting go. But one of the things, it began with me, and so for over the years, it's been a journey in discovering what's actually true for me. Because the other thing is you can't receive acknowledgement from anyone unless you're willing to have it for you, which is what we've kind of been talking about with this. If you're somebody who is seeking validation, which I think a lot of us can relate to, is like, tell me I'm doing good. Give me an attaboy, or tell me I'm doing a great job. I always looked for that, but it was only because I wanted somebody else to give me the positive judgment so that I wouldn't have to acknowledge me. And to be honest with you, Mick, it's one of the things that I found toughest is actually, it's easy to acknowledge the crap, and be like, oh, I'm no good at this, or, my life doesn't work here. But to actually acknowledge where I'm great, to actually acknowledge, what, I am actually a gift, or I am of value to this world. And I think that for each and every one of us, that takes the willingness to actually because see, it's not looking at it with yourself as, oh, let me acknowledge that I'm a gift here for the world so that I can project that out into the world and be and create some image with it. It's a conversation between you and you. And that to me, that takes a lot of vulnerability, and to be able to also recognize where you don't have that with yourself.
So we're getting a lot of authenticity coming through here and being true to yourself, in both positive and negative. And I want to unpack that a little bit more. Let's come back to societal pre-programming again. And the word that was popping into my head when you were talking before is humility. And we're all told that we should be humble and we don't big note ourselves, etc. But I've had this thought for a while now, Brendon, and listening to you, it's doubling down on it, that humility sometimes holds us back from what we can be. All right. So humility is something nice. We don't want to go around and pretend that we know everything, because we don't. But if humility comes at the expense of not acknowledging what our own individual superpower is, well, we don't get the level of greatness that we could be by letting ourselves acknowledge, actually, you know what? I am really good at that. And it's okay to be good at that. And it's okay for me to project the world that I'm good at that thing, as long as I don't pretend that I'm good at everything. How does that sit with you? This balance of humility takes over and we start being humble about everything, including the things that we're actually good at.
Well, I think if we start at the beginning of what you started with, the societal programming, if we look at culturally the way that works in Australia, for example, which is the same with a lot of different countries, it's just said a different way, or it's packaged a different way. Is in Australia, it's you don't want to be the tall poppy. You don't want to stand above everybody else or you'll be cut down. So if we look at that, because it's the idea also that we can't know everything, that we can't know about what's true for us. Well, one of the things we talk about in Access Consciousness is you as a being as an infinite being, have infinite perceiving, infinite knowing, and infinite receiving. So in that, what a lot of us have been taught to do is think and programmed to think. And thinking is the lower harmonic of knowing, because how many of us have known something instantaneously that we haven't been taught before? and you'll know what to do. You'll know what to choose. So the idea that we don't know what's true for us and that we have to get to it, that it's some destination of how much work am I going to have to do to get to know what's true for me? No, it's more you already know, but we've learned a lot of other things to diminish it or to not tap into it. And that's the thing I love about Access is it's about giving you access to everything you already are, stripping off, the lies that we tell ourselves, stripping off all of these other things that we pile on top of ourselves with impossibilities and judgment and the way we define our lives and all of that stuff to question once again, okay, what do I actually know about this that I'm not acknowledging? What do I know about what's true for me that I'm not acknowledging? And that's a whole different question, because one of the aha moments for me when I did this first seminar that I did with the founder of Access Consciousness, Gary Douglas, who such a brilliant man. I was in this seminar and he was talking about choice. And he said, your life today is a sum total of every choice you've ever made. And I was like, what? Because for me, I was going, no, my life today is the way it is because I can't have money because I grew up poor. I can't be happy because I had so much abuse. I can't create a relationship because I never saw anybody else creating one. Like I had a reason and justification for everything. And when he said that, I was like, wow, I could actually make different choices. But with that, because choice can be an interesting thing where it's like, but how do I know what to choose? With a question of like, one of the questions I use is, okay, if I choose this, what will my life be like in 5 years? Not look like, or how's it going to look exactly? And what's, not trying to get a result, but trying to more so get an awareness of the energy. If I don't choose this, what's my life going to be like in 5 years? And if even for everyone listening, like if you take something that you're kind of wrestling with at the moment and ask those two questions, which one gives you more of a sense of, call it lightness, or call it more of a sense of like joy or enthusiasm in your world? That's an awareness of the choice that you are aware of that's going to create something greater. Another way that we can look at it with, because me coming along, being, who I was creating myself as at this point, it's like me know what I know, like know what's true for me. I don't think so. You guys need to give me some answers. You need to set me on a path so that I can actually create my life. But it wasn't about that. And a tool with that, or just to give people a bit of awareness, is look at a time in your life that you chose something and you knew it wasn't going to work. It knotted your stomach up, or you just knew it wasn't going to work, but you chose it anyway. So the idea that we don't know is one of the biggest lies that we tell ourselves.
I'm going to say that there's going to be many people in the audience that are feeling what I feel. That is a phenomena that happens a lot. This thing that you're saying, that you discover something new, but somehow you already knew it. That is something that happens a lot if we let it happen. But how do we intentionally tap into that? It's a really interesting question. Let me share what I'm taking away so far, Brendon, and I want to see what you think. So putting judgment aside, stop judging ourselves against these expectations that we've built up in our head around societal expectations or judging ourselves against others, putting judgment aside. The second one I'm hearing is question everything. And that is, if you have these thoughts in your head about I'm not this, I'm not that, etc., do I know that to be true? And why do I believe that is to be true? And now I'm hearing, now we start making intentional choices. And those intentional choices, projecting forward, what would my life look like if I made this choice? What would I look like if I didn't make this choice? So we're wrestling back control, coming back to you as a Tyler in that bedroom with your 4-year-old son, and you had stumbled in life until then, and life was happening to you. Now switching that over to making intentional choices about our life. So park judgment, question everything, make intentional choices. How does that sit with you?
Yeah, well, I would definitely say the park judgment thing, in beginning with that, because see, the thing with that too is for a lot of us, we're not necessarily that present in our lives. Like if we look at judgment, for example, for a lot of us, we don't even recognize where we're doing it. It's just become a part of life. It's what you do. Of course I judge. Like how else am I going to see what's right or wrong? So with getting out of it, because we could make it simple and go, look at where you judge and stop it. But when you've created your life like that and created the box of, that you have decided you exist within, then the idea of getting just give up judgment. It's like, yeah, okay, give me a little bit more on that is what if you could get actually present with the areas of your life that you have judgment? What I mean with that is rather than avoid that you have judgment of yourself in these areas of your life, actually get present with it and be like, wow, I have a lot of judgment of me in this area. It could be with creating your life. It could be with how you show up around people. It could be, something that was big for me has been addiction. And it was like, wow, I really see this as a big wrongness. I'm going to be with this and actually not avoid it anymore. Great question to ask with that stuff. When you're actually willing to get present with it is what's right about me I'm not getting, and what's right about this I'm not getting. Because one of the things that I've found, and this was not an easy one for me to look at, was this thing that Gary Douglas once again said, he said, what if your greatest wrongness is your greatest strongness? And I was like, how does that work? My greatest wrongness is obviously my greatest weakness. No, what if your greatest wrongness is actually your greatest strongness, but you pile all that judgment on top of it so that you never get access to the strength that you are? So using myself as an example with this, because you hear that and you're like, sounds kind of cool. Wow, how do I get to it? I said the thing about addiction. Well, I had to get really present with it and be like, okay, what if this isn't wrong? What's the gift in this? What's the strength in this that I'm not acknowledging? And I started finding gift after gift after gift when I was willing to take the judgment off it. And that's a really different way in looking at judgment, where you're like, wow, I've been judging myself my whole life as being less than. Let me get present with it. What's the gift in this that I'm not acknowledging? Oh, wow. Well, I actually knew that if I appeared that way, then I wouldn't actually create beyond these people or whatever that is. But you start unwinding it to actually get to more of what's true for you, get to more consciousness, get to more lightness.
So I'm hearing two things there, Brendon. So the first one is actually awareness that you are being judgmental. So to notice and name it. Otherwise, there's probably a whole bunch of implicit bias in your head the whole time. Anyway, you're being judgmental, but you just didn't even notice. So notice and name when you're being judgmental and then start questioning the judgment. Is that true? And is there another way of looking at the same thing?
Yeah, there's so many different kind of nuances with the thing, which is why I'm grateful for this conversation, because it's kind of exploring different ways of actually unwinding all the things in your life that create the limitations. Otherwise, we're going for one answer. Oh, it is this, and this is what I have to do. Well, that could be one of the things, but what about a question of what is this? Is this judgment? And beginning with that. But also, one of the things we tend to do is sensitize ourselves to the energies that we've grown up with. So using myself as an example for this again is I grew up with a lot of sadness, a lot of anger, a lot of kind of that energy of less than. So that energy for me became that's what I know. That was comfortable. That was definable. That was what I decided was me. So when something shows up that doesn't match that, you're like, wow, that seems like a really uncomfortable choice. Or does it just not match what you have sensitized yourself with energetically? So this is even going into more of this, but it's another great question with this is if you find yourself kind of doing a lot of the things that the people did that you grew up with, a lot of anger, a lot of sadness, or a lot of no hope, or a lot of judgment, then you can ask, okay, who am I being? And I'll ask myself that when I'm kind of when I'm just not being me, who am I being? And it's oh man, I'm being my mother, or I'm being my father, or I'm being this person, or I'm being that person. Okay, if I was being me right now, what would I choose? And so that's a different way of looking at it too. But let me give another tool here that was so helpful for me in the beginning of, finding access and discovering these tools was, I think it was in maybe the first or second bars session that I got with this girl. And she was like, oh, we have this tool called Who Does It Belong To? Basically, the way this works is what we've discovered is 98% of your thoughts, your feelings, and your emotions don't actually belong to you. You're just so aware that you pick them up from everyone and everything around you. And I remember when she said it and I was like, holy shit, that describes my whole life, because I would wonder why I'd be like, as a kid and then through, school and then adolescence, I'd wonder why I'd be like joyful. And then all of a sudden I'm miserable in a heartbeat. I'd be like, where did my happy go? Nothing. I didn't even do anything. And now I'm heavy and I'm like stuck and I don't know where to go and I don't know what to choose. I didn't realize that I had a lot of awareness, like each and every one of us do. Is like, have you ever, walked into a room and been aware of what was going on for the people in the room, or kind of been driving down the highway and been happy and joyful, and then all of a sudden you're thinking, I hate my life, or, so this question was really helpful for me, is when anything shows up, any thoughts, any feelings, any emotions, is asked, who's this belong to? And if it lightens up at all, then it's not yours. You just return it to sender with consciousness attached and move on. Do it with the next thing that comes up. And for me, I found that a lot of the things that were stopping me and sticking me weren't mine. They were just awarenesses that I had.
All right. So I want to bring this to something quite practical right now, Brendon, just listening to you, particularly this last point. So there's going to be people listening to the show that are, if they're being honest with themselves, looking up in the mirror, a lot of it's going to be resonating. They're going to be going, yeah, I'm going around my life and finding that it's quite incongruent with who I really am. I'm going through the motions. I'm living by other people's standards. I'm living other people's lives in many respects. Was that me, or was it the sum of the people that are around me that made me feel that way? And there's going to be these light bulb moments where they do want to get back to authenticity of who they really are and living a congruent life to themselves. Where does someone start? If they're listening to your story, Brendon, and going, oh, that's me, where does someone start?
Well, that's a great question, and it really is, because it's like, let me give a couple of things. Because see, we tend to also, in the beginning for me, it was like, oh man, like this is like making my world lighter. Like I'm actually wanting to live again. I'm actually like desiring to create my life. And I was in that same spot and I just wanted to throw everything away, and start again. But it's like, what I didn't realize at the time is there's brilliance in everything. There's a gift in everything if you're willing to acknowledge that. So I would say, for people like that, don't go to judgment of yourself. First of all, don't go to judgment of what you haven't created. What if you've created your life exactly the way you've created it up until this point to get to something different? Okay, so that would be my first thing, is don't go to judgment. And then once again, like from asking questions from curiosity, like actually being curious about, okay, cool. So this is where I'm at now. I wonder what else is possible for me that I've never considered. I wonder what I could choose today that I haven't chosen before. Or I wonder what I could be today that I haven't been willing to be before, and just move and recognize that choice is good for 10 seconds. Okay, I chose this. It didn't work. Rather than sit in it and judge yourself, okay, that's done. Now what can I choose? And if you're constantly moving forward, then you can start navigating your life based on what you're aware of what's true for you. Now, in order to get to that, one of the things we talk about in Access is what's true for you will always make you lighter, always. A judgment or what's not true for you will always make you heavier. So, but see, a lot of us have learned to navigate our lives with judgment, with, well, what's right and what's wrong. Let me find the path with what's right and what's wrong, rather than what's light and what's heavy. So you begin to, rather than go, okay, now I only want to create the good stuff as my life, is you're in judgment still. You're still only trying to make the choices that are going to create the good stuff. But what if the choices that don't create the good stuff, what if they're a gift also? What if they're also a part in moving forward and growing, like actually getting more of what's true for you and going, well, that was heavy. Like that didn't make me any lighter. What's another choice?
All right. So I'm hearing a lot of paying attention to these choices and this light and heavy, and almost that being your guide as to what I might do next, but making very conscious choices. This is the word now, right? Consciousness, conscious choices, intentional choices where you're actually paying attention, not on autopilot, to go back to the start of our story.
Yeah. When you're actually being present. And see, because this is, it's been a big lesson for me throughout my life. And, on this recent journey is listening to myself, and not just listening to my head, but listening to the way that I present myself in my own world. Like, once again, like kind of hearing where I've got the judgments. And that might not be like hearing them, verbally but just being present and going, wow, I have the point of view here. Like, if we take money, for example, if you're constantly thinking, I'm never going to have enough money, I'm always going to run out of money, money's hard to make, money's difficult, money's this, but you're not present with your thinking, you're just on autopilot. That's how I think. Money's difficult, money's hard, all of that. That's exactly what's creating your life. But how do you change it when you're not present with it? You can't. So you got to get present with it and go, wow, I just have been thinking about how much I struggle with money for the last 10 minutes. It's exactly what's showing up in my life. Okay, stop. And then a great tool for this is any point of view that you have. You want to say or think, interesting point of view. I have this point of view. Because like I said in the beginning, it's our point of view that creates our reality. And when you're willing to change that, by getting present with it and going, oh, because first, we could even take that into the who does it belong to thing. Like, if you're constantly thinking, man, I struggle with money, look at where the world's at right now, or look at what you grew up with, or look at, once again, what you're sensitized to energetically is. I know for me, I grew up with people who money was a struggle. Money was conflict, so that's just how it is. I wouldn't even question it.
Yeah, so where did it come from? Who does it belong to? I think these are the questions that we can ask ourselves, but we need to notice the judgment first, and then we can start unpacking to know, well, is that true? Where did it come from? Is there a way to reframe it? These are really powerful things. Really like it, Brendon. Going to bring us now to a close. It's been a really insightful conversation so far, and there's going to be a lot of people that are stopping and thinking and reflecting on this and wondering about how much of this resonates with their own lives. And so thank you so much for sharing this.
Oh, Mick, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
We're going to go now to the final 4 questions. These are the same questions we ask all of our guests. So what's the one thing you know now? I think we already know, by the way. But what's the one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you were 20, Brendon Watt?
The one thing that I know now that I wish I knew when I was 20 was life doesn't have to be difficult. Life can actually be enjoyable. And, and there's a lot of stuff out there that can contribute to that.
Yeah, good one. Very powerful. Thank you, sir. What's your favorite book?
You know what? I would have to say there's a novel that actually Gary Douglas wrote it. The founder of Access Consciousness. It's called The Place. And I've read it like 10 times. I love this book. So I highly suggest checking that out. The Place.
All right. Wonderful. What's your favorite quote?
You know what? There's actually an Albert Einstein quote that is, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Yeah. And yet we find ourselves doing that a lot, don't we?
Oh, I hear you. It's just a little bit insane.
Yeah, all right. And finally, how do people find you, Brendon? If this has been light bulb moment for them and they'd like to know more about you, more about Access Consciousness, more about your services, how do they find you?
You can check my website, brendonwatt.com. If any of this has kind of set off a light bulb in your world, I would say check out accessconsciousness.com. But also YouTube. My name, Gary Douglas, Dr. Dane here, Access Consciousness. There is a lot out there and a lot of tools. So if any of this was like, oh, that sounds cool, you'll find a lot more of it out there.
All right. Thank you so much, Brendon Watt, for sharing your time with us today and for sharing your story as well, very openly, your own backstory, and then how you've now cultivated that with Access Consciousness. Thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mick. I'm very grateful. Thank you.
You've been listening to The Leadership Project. In the next episode, we're joined by Jennifer Mulholland and Jeff Shuck of Plenty Consulting. In this wonderful conversation, we're going to focus on conscious leadership and the trinity of awareness, alignment, and intentionality in your leadership. You don't want to miss this. Thank you for listening to The Leadership Project at mickspears.com. A huge call out to Faris Sadek for his video editing of all of our video content, and to all of the team at TLP. Joanne Goes On, Gerald Calabo, and my amazing wife, Say Spears. I could not do this show without you. Don't forget to subscribe to the Leadership Project YouTube channel, where we bring you interesting videos each and every week. And you can follow us on social, particularly on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Now, in the meantime, please do take care, look out for each other, and join us on this journey as we learn together and lead together.